I'm probably gonna get in trouble for saying this, but here's the thing. Samyang is a popular artist, and recently somebody fed his images into an AI model, allowing anyone to very easily replicate his art style. This upset people in the art community and brought him into conflict with the AI community. It got ugly, and artists are now worried that AI software will allow people to blatantly use their work without them reaping any of the rewards or even getting credit. Their fears are not unfounded. Things like this have happened long before AI. For example, here's Richard Prince. In the 80s, Prince took photographs of Marlboro cowboy ads and sold them for millions. He didn't ask for permission from the original photographers, he didn't even credit them. And a few years ago, he took screenshots of Instagram posts, printed them out, and sold them for tens of thousands of dollars a pop, without permission, without anything. So the thought of AI image software in the hands of a Richard Prince type character is worrisome. However, because AI software has such potential to abuse artistic works, many people, not all, not most, but many, have argued that using AI images trained on other artists is wrong altogether. Just flat out. A sort of AI Luddism has emerged. Oh, by the way, Luddism is the philosophy of opposing new technology. It's named after 19th century textile workers called Luddites. Luddites felt threatened by industrialization, so they formed angry mobs and destroyed textile machines. And there were similar events between farmers and agricultural machinery. Now, I understand concerns such as plagiarists and companies abusing AI, I do, but when it comes to individuals using AI, this Luddite position is where you lose me. The reason why I disagree with it is because in the history of art, especially after the invention of mass media, there have been many amazing derivative artworks. Now, before we continue, let me pause the video and explain exactly what I mean by derivative artworks. When I say derivative artworks, I don't mean influence, or inspiration, or imitation, or adaptation, or a new rendition, or homage, or ready-made art. I mean art that is made using pre-existing artworks. When an artist takes art that already exists, keeps the parts they like, fills it in with other elements, and adds their own thing to it. Parts of the original remain, but they have been changed and built upon so much that it has become something new and has new qualities. This concept is known as transformation. Let me show you an example. Here's one of Andy Warhol's iconic Marilyn portraits. Now, Warhol did not take the photographs of the celebrities in his work, but with technology, screen printing in his case, he was able to extract parts of the photographs, which he then colored and arranged in a series. You may not enjoy Warhol's work. You may not think it's any good, but I think we can agree that it is something new and has new qualities. The reason why Richard Prince bothers so many people, but Warhol doesn't, is because they don't feel that visually or conceptually there's a worthwhile difference between this and this, while there is between this and this. That difference is transformation. Okay, now, let's wind it back. There have been many amazing derivative artworks. You probably enjoy derivative work every day because there's a very common practice in the music industry called sampling. Okay, pay attention to the melody in this Bach piece. In the 60s, a jazz band made this version. Now, imagine if we chopped it up and added some bass and drums to it. And finally, we add something new on top. Do you see what I see? Why do we live like this? And there you have it, a new thing made using an old thing. This is what bothers me about the notion that any use of AI models trained on artists is bad, because in an attempt to protect this art, you may also end up discouraging this art. And if you don't believe me, if you think I'm overreacting, there's a very strong parallel I can draw. Music sampling, as we know it today, started in New York during the 70s. Kids from poor neighborhoods didn't have a lot of resources to make art, so they created using what they had, and their weapons of choice were turntables, which they used to mix and match their parents' funk and soul records, and in doing so created beats they could party to and rap over. This phenomenon is known as hip-hop. Today it's arguably the biggest genre of popular music, and sampling is widespread. Most bands and labels will clear your samples for use if you go through the process of obtaining the rights. Not all though, there are plenty of bands and labels who will almost certainly deny your request to sample them. and the cost of getting a sample cleared can reach astronomical prices. Artists feel like this has put a limitation on their ability to produce music, and I tend to agree. There are plenty of classic hip-hop tracks from the 80s you couldn't produce today. There are songs you would have loved which you will now never hear because the music industry became so greedy and copyright vigilant. Things could have been worse though. Imagine if saying using music sampled from other artists is wrong was the dominant opinion and sampling was legally and ethically widely discouraged. You wouldn't just have no hip-hop, there'd be no Daft Punk, no Gorillaz, no Chemical Brothers, no Groove Jet, no Extreme Ways, and worst of all, no Crying at the Discotheque by Alcazar. Alright, so to finally bring this back to the topic of AI. Right now there are artists making AI images trained on Giger and Greg Rutkowski and Van Gogh and Arcane, and they're transforming it, photobashing the results together and painting over it, making art that doesn't resemble Giger or Rutkowski or whoever. They're making something new, using something old, just like we've been using computers to remix art for nearly 40 years now. Like if you took my art, chopped it into pieces, used those pieces to make new art, then drew over it, I wouldn't feel like it was my art anymore, and I'd respect it as its own thing. And come on, I know for a fact that artists don't always have the rights to use the assets they do, especially 3D people and photo bashers. Don't pretend like you've never copied something straight off of Google Images. There's an unspoken rule that if you don't use too much of the source material, if you change it enough, if it's not recognizable in the final product, it's fair game. And I think this same courtesy should be extended to art that uses AI graphics. My whole point here is that by vilifying AI models of artists, think of all the great art you may be discouraging. Whew, okay, look. AI image generation is perhaps the biggest shift in how we make visual media since the invention of photography. Bigger even than digital art itself, because things like digital painting are just high-tech versions of traditional mediums, while machine learning and diffusion models are something entirely new, and we have a lot to figure out both legally and ethically, just as the music industry had a lot to figure out when sampling came around. And I mean, for better or for worse, you can't stop how people create. You just can't, and we won't be able to stop people training AI models on art and using them. What we can do is what we've always done: encourage people to use their tools respectfully and to not be unoriginal with their results. Artificial intelligence is here to stay, so let's use it intelligently. Oh, and by the way, don't misunderstand. I welcome the discourse. We should be careful and responsible with technology. All technology. Except for guitar distortion. You can never have too much guitar distortion. But I've heard very little in terms of the good AI can bring, in ways that I think should be quite non-controversial. Here, I'll give you 3 examples. Right now there's a kid out there who loves Sam Yang and wants to learn from him. Be the next cute girl in the Sunshine Master. Now, this kid can use the image-to-image feature and put their art through AI, then study the results, learn from the results, and use this knowledge to become a better artist. In this way, this technology has the potential to hyperboost the rates at which artists advance their skills, similar to how learning guitar has become much more accessible because of the internet. Some artists don't even use their AI renders in their artwork. They just use it as inspiration or as a reference for color, composition and such. I've only used AI professionally once so far, and it was in this sort of way. DALL-E Mini helped me generate initial ideas in the prototyping stage, and later Stable Diffusion was useful to show the client a bunch of mock-ups and help them settle on a design, before I went on to make the artwork with the usual techniques. So instead of browsing Pinterest, you can just make your own references. This is super useful for all kinds of artists. There are people out there who, due to issues with their mind or body, have difficulty making art. I've seen comments saying that AI has enabled them to make art they would otherwise be unable to because of being disabled. I have this one friend who has an active imagination, but due to psychological stuff, he simply cannot learn to draw. Trust me, I've tried to teach him, but he can't. And AI is enabling him, finally, to get the images he has in his head into the world, and I think that's great. See, I wish that everybody who wants to make art could, but unfortunately that's just not true for some people. Admittedly, this is an outlier example, but I mean, it's still a thing worth considering. Anyway, I hope I've given you some new perspectives and food for thought, and thanks for listening.